Hello, my grots and gits. Welcome back to Happy Corp and Wargaming. Today, we have a freaking amazing episode for you today. We are going to be going through some incredibly important things. As a matter of fact, today, you are going to finally learn to stop being so afraid of the mounted keyword. Let's jump right on into it. But before we start, everybody, this channel is sponsored by me and me alone, and I love all of you, and I appreciate all of your support. If you're interested in more tactical advice that goes beyond what we do in the videos, you should hop into the members side of the Happy Corp and Wargaming Discord, where we talk about high-level tactics with a variety of different armies every single day. We do also have a free section for those of you who would just like to jump in and wet your toes. However, that section is being utilized less and less as our membership is growing. We're moving a lot of the content more to the members side. However, we still love all of our free members, and we're absolutely still active there. It's just things are moving more and more towards the members side. So, let's go ahead and jump right on into this video. Let's talk about monsters and vehicles. One of the big problems that I see in this game right now is that everyone is so afraid of a few certain keywords. They think that everything has to be infantry. If it's not infantry, you can't use it because it can't go straight through walls, and that means it is useless. Well, this is not true. Vehicles and monsters are very, very usable, as you see in a lot of lists, because we tend to bring a lot of vehicles. But even more so, we have the mounted keyword, which is actually a fantastic keyword, and today I'm going to give you the argument and exactly why it's so useful, and I'm going to go on to the TTS views, and I'm going to show you actually how to move and how to utilize your mounted and your monsters and your vehicles to maximum effect so that you can crush your opponents. Alright, so let's start with our monsters and vehicles. And remember, this video is really focused on the movement aspect of things, not so much the combat and the shooting inside, but we'll briefly touch on those as well. But one of the main weaknesses of our monsters and vehicles, number one, you can't move through walls, so walls will move block you. Now, I do want to take a brief moment to just remind every single person that in 10th edition Warhammer, if the terrain is 2 inches or less, any unit in the game can move over it without penalty. That means on most of your GW layouts, the short side of ruins, you can pretty much just always move straight over without contest, which is really darn exciting. On WTC style, I think most of those ruins are like actually 3 inches high, so it doesn't really work there. But on GW layouts, you just move right over the short sides. Now, number two, so we can't move through walls. Now, number two is that we are actually tend to be susceptible to move blocking. What is move blocking? Move blocking is the strategy of actually just utilizing generally chaff or cheap units in order to stop your opponent from being able to move up that battlefield. Now, I did a move blocking master course in 9th edition, but it's a little outdated, so I am going to redo it, and I'm going to update it for 10th edition with all the beautiful shenanigans that we have available to us in 10th edition so that you guys will be able to learn the max out of move blocking. I'm going to teach all you need to know about screening, move blocking, scout moves, all these super useful tools. But that'll be a different video. So then number two, the number three thing, which is kind of a weakness of our monsters and vehicles, is the fact that we get to be shot while we're engaged, meaning we can't hide if we're in combat. So if we're stuck in combat and you want to shoot us, you still can. You're just at -1 to hit. Which is kind of a troublesome thing for a lot of our monsters and our vehicles, especially our melee monsters and vehicles that are trying to use combat to stop themselves from being shot. All right, now the next weakness is that there's a lot of anti-keywords. Now, much more anti-vehicle keywords than there are anti-monster keywords. As far as I know, actually, I'm pretty sure orcs are the only army with the anti-monster keyword available to them. I'm sure I could be missing something, and if you know what that is, please type it down in the comments below. Wow, other armies or other abilities that can give you the anti-monster keyword. Because I just don't see anything outside of orcs, but I'm sure I'm missing someone. So if you wouldn't mind typing that in the comments, that'd be really great. But the anti-vehicle keyword, meaning you just wound vehicles on whatever number. Let's take the Brokir Thunderkin from Votan. Those guys have Blast anti-vehicle 2-up. It is such a bizarre combination of keywords for their guns, but it will melt vehicles. So the anti-keyword is actually a really big weakness for our monsters and vehicles as well. And then the other problem is that monsters and vehicles cannot move through monsters and vehicles. Because remember, in 10th edition, you can always move through your own units. Unless you're a monster and vehicle, in which case you can't move through monster vehicles. Monsters and vehicles can move over and through infantry, mounted, no problem, but they can't do it with other monsters and vehicles. And on the other hand, just remember that mounted and infantry can actually move through monsters and vehicles. It just doesn't flip, okay? All right, so those are our weaknesses with our monsters and vehicles. Let's talk about some of our strengths. This is Screamer Killer, which, by the way, is amazing model, and I freaking love it, and I'm sad I don't see more of them. I think they hit really hard. They're freaking awesome. I would love to see them more on the tabletop. Anyway, I digress. What are our strengths as our monsters and vehicles? Well, one of the big strengths that we have is a huge base. That huge base, which absolutely makes us susceptible to move blocks, also gives us the ability to move block our opponent very efficiently. It also allows us to engage multiple units, and this is a very, very powerful tool. So we get to move block better when we use monsters and vehicles, and we get to engage multiple units with our bases, which can be exceptionally freaking powerful when you stack it with the ability that our monsters and vehicles typically have very high toughness, and if we tag multiple units, a lot of times the enemy might actually have to waste an entire turn just falling back, doing nothing else, and that is brutal to the opponent. So big base can actually be a strength, not just a weakness. Then we have the ability called Big Guns Never Tire, and Big Guns Never Tire is an ability that's active in the shooting phase only, not in Overwatch. Remember, Big Guns Never Tire is only active in the shooting phase. And in the shooting phase, it allows your monsters or your vehicles to shoot the guns they have into combat. Into or out of combat, actually. You can shoot out of combat, you can shoot into combat. The only thing that you can't do is you cannot shoot into another combat, if that makes sense. So let me break this down for you real quick. So if Unit A, which is, say, my Carnifex is hanging out here, and he's got a Venom Cannon, and he wants to shoot the unit that he's engaged with. Hold on, I don't remember if Venom Cannon has Blast. I'm going to use a different example. We have a Dreadnought Redemptor, a Redemptor Dreadnought, and he's hanging out in melee, and he wants to shoot the units he's engaged with. He totally can. If he wants to shoot units that he's not engaged with, he totally can. But if he wants to shoot in units that are engaged with another Dreadnought, he cannot shoot them, because you can't shoot into another combat, but you can shoot into another unengaged combat or the combat you are in. Now, Blast is the exception here. You can never shoot blast weapons into combat, but you can still shoot blast weapons out of combat. All right? So, for example, with our Redemptor Dreadnought, he's going to have to shoot his macro plasma gun into out of combat, into another unit that is not engaged with anyone. But he can shoot the rest of his guns into the combat that he's currently engaged with. All right. Then it is exceptionally, and I mean exceptionally easy for your monsters and vehicles to gain the benefit of cover. And the reason for this is really simple. In 10th edition, you get cover if your model, not the base model, is partially obscured by a ruin. And there's no 10% roll, there's no 3% roll. If there is a 0.5% of your model that is covered, that is blocked from line of sight because of a ruin, that monster or vehicle will get cover, which is kind of bananas, but it's so easy for these typically 2-up armor save units to have cover. It's kind of bananas. So, monsters and vehicle strengths. What I want to do now is I'm going to talk about the mounted, and I'm going to go through the weaknesses and strengths of the mounted, and then I'm going to go to the TTS, or the tabletop simulator view, and I'm going to actually show you how we're going to move these things up the board using GW terrain. Mounted, the strongest keyword. What are, well, all right, maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, because by the way, the infantry keyword is still very, very powerful. Mounted might not, but it's mounted keyword is a lot better than a lot of people are thinking. But we do have struggles. So let's talk about our struggles. Number one, we cannot move through walls. Does that sound familiar to you? Well, it should, because the only thing in the game that can move through walls is beast and infantry. Remember, swarms can't do it anymore. So those stupid nurglings or those scarab swarms, if you're playing Necrons, they cannot move through walls. They no longer are able to breach. It is only beast and infantry that can move through walls. Now, so mounted, we can't move through walls, and we can be move blocked. So it's the same weaknesses as monsters. And we tend to have larger bases, which can make movement a little bit awkward at times. Now, we don't have to struggle with a few things. One of the things that we don't have to struggle with is once mounted is engaged in combat, they can't be shot. So it's going to require the enemy to actually fall back from that combat before anything else could shoot them. And that's actually a real big plus for the cavalry. Let's talk about some of the strengths on the cavalry, because there are a lot of strengths too. So one of the strengths that I want to start with is larger bases. Well, that allows us to screen, move block. It allows us to engage multiple units. This is sounding familiar to you, yes. But the next strength, and this is a exceptional strength in the game right now, there's no anti-mounted keyword. If I'm wrong here, I'll be very surprised, but please type it into the comments if I am wrong. There is no anti-mounted keyword in the entire game. And remember, the way the game works is that if you have the say, infantry 2-up keyword, that stacks with things like devastating wounds. So every 2-up would count as a dev wound, which would not allow the infantry to get any saves. And it's an exceptionally powerful combination that is brutal for your opponent to be able to deal with, because no saves are allowed against devastating wounds. So if you have, say, anti-monster 4-up and dev wounds, then every single time you hit that monster on a 4-up, it counts as devastating wounds, which is so brutal. But when it comes to mounted, there is no anti-keyword. So incredibly powerful, meaning essentially that you will never have to worry about getting dev wounded to death with him. Now, dev wounds will still operate on things like your natural 6s to wound, but they're not going to be operating any lower, like you can with tons of infantry or tons of anti-vehicle keywords across the game. Now, faster. Mounted units tend to be a lot faster than your infantry. I would like to see a lot of your mounted units get even faster than they are currently, but this is a very powerful ability because speed is the name of the game, baby. There are some units that count as flying and mounted, which is a very great keyword because those guys can't be move blocked at all. But they are faster, and that is a very, very good powerful. Now, I just want to reiterate here, guys. Remember, everything is going to ignore the 2 inches of height for movement when it comes to movement. And this is going to be really critical to your understanding of the game if you play on GW terrain. Now, when you play on WTC terrain, and I play on a lot of WTC terrain, you can still use mounted very effectively. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to switch to the tabletop simulator view. And I'm going to show you how I would actually deploy my infantry vehicle list. And how am I going to be planning on moving it across the battlefield. So let's go ahead and switch to that TTS view. And I'm just going to kind of give a little tutorial here, guys. The number one piece of advice I have for you, by the way, when you're talking about mounted doesn't suck. The reason why people think that the mounted keyword sucks and you can't use it very well is because people say mounted sucks and you can't use it very well. They're not correct. Mounted does take a different skill set to use in infantry. There's no doubt about that, and it's not as easy as infantry, but it doesn't suck. It's actually very, very strong, and I'm going to show you how to use it right now. So let's go to the tabletop simulator view. All right, so we're on the tabletop simulator view right now, and I've kind of done a little layout. So this is GW layout 3, and we're on a hammer and anvil deployment. So what I've done is I've deployed my orcs against a bunch of space marines. These space marines, we're just kind of like a lot of inceptors and reserves. Boom, boom, boom. Let's say that we have some death company here, and they're going to be over here, blah, blah, blah. And then, so we'll just drop them there. We've got a gladiator lancer. We've got a bunch of whirlwinds in the back. So what I did for you guys is I drew your firing lanes. This is something I recommend that everyone does on their battlefield. You can actually just take a piece of paper, print out the layouts for Games Workshop's recommended terrain, and you can draw these yourself. So you'll see exactly where your opponent's line of sight actually is on your map. When I went to the WTC last year, or this year, I guess, it was actually very funny because you had some teams that had shown up with the layouts all pre-mapped out, and they drew lines and they handed it to their opponent saying, this is where you're allowed to deploy where I can't see you. And it was actually quite funny. But this is one of the things I actually have all my coaching clients, by the way, do when they're preparing for their games and they're getting ready. It really helps you learn how to deploy. So I drew these line of sight lines. So this red line here is where you can draw line of sight. So you're going to have to run between these two ruins, which means that he's going to have to be over this line if he wants to be able to see my Squighog boys. Same thing over here. This is the line of sight availability. So you're going to have to be over that line to be able to see further. So on my deployment, they can't see from the deployment. So if they want to see me, they're going to have to come out of the deployment, which is exceptionally dangerous for the Space Marines in this situation. Now, when I'm using a lot of mounted in vehicles like this, I am playing an aggressive list, and I understand that. I'm not necessarily playing the weakest list. But look at this. We have 1 6-man of Squighogs. And this is not just for orcs, by the way, guys. This is for any army that wants to utilize mounted, wants to utilize vehicles. Orcs is just a great example. So right here, this unit can very comfortably go inside this little pocket, and they can't be seen at all because remember, you can't see through the ruins no matter where you're standing. But it also gives me access to be able to move very freely turn 1. I get to go 10 inches up. I probably get to advance them, put them wherever I need them to go. Then over here in this little pocket, I can very comfortably fit a Mazrog who can't be seen. I can fit a truck who cannot be seen. I can fit another truck who cannot be seen. And then I can be fitting an entire unit of Squighogs, which also cannot be seen. Now, just because someone's going to mention that, oh, they're out of coherency, let's go ahead and fix this because I was technically at 2.1. Sorry. Now it's completely legal. Okay. Anyone who wants to complain about my coherency, you can stop. We know the internet. Anyway. This is something that I often do with my Squighogs. I tend to wrap them around my trucks because what this allows for is it allows for me to get very creative with my deployment while still being perfectly safe in my turn 1 movement phase. So right now I'm in coherency, and remember, your Squighogs get to move straight through these vehicles. So say I go first and I want to advance them rapidly up the battlefield, I just roll the advance and I move straight through my vehicle and I don't care. And since we're on GW layout terrain, this ruin here counts as 2 inches high, so I get to ignore this as far as modifying my movement is concerned, and that is very, very powerful. And remember, my trucks aren't trapped here either, because my trucks also get to move directly over your vehicles, or directly over your Squighogs. So my truck gets to roll in advance, and now he can stage here and be perfectly safe. Or I could just run him right up at the enemy, depending on what my plan is. Right here, Mr. Mazrog is hanging out here, perfectly safe. He's going to get to walk right over these ruins and go straight to the middle without even doing an advance, or he could hang out in this pocket and be perfectly safe for staging for round 2. So there's lots of different options for me here. Over here, there's no line of sight, so this truck is perfectly safe where he is. This is on GW Layout 3. GW Layout 1 is even better. GW Layout 4 is actually quite good. The only time where we have really any issue, it's going to be GW Layout 2, and that's just, some maps are harder than others, and that's just part of the game, right? So GW Layout 2 does make it a little bit harder to deploy your army if you're running a lot of mounted and vehicles. But let me give you the example here. So let's say that we go second, and we're really worried about what our Space Marine opponent is going to do. Well, if our Space Marine opponent, if this Gladiator Lancer wants to come, he's going to have to, actually, I don't even think he can fit there right there, so he can't even deploy there anyway, so he's going to have to start over here. So if he wants to move to see me, he's going to have to go out, and let's just go ahead and move. So he's going to have to come 10 inches out right about here. And honestly, right here, he still cannot see my squid cogs. Because, remember, even though he's across the red line here, and you would be able to draw a line of sight here, he can't see through this freaking ruin because it's not wholly within. So even moving his full 10 inches to shoot, this Gladiator Lancer is now useless. He can't shoot these hogs, and he can't shoot these hogs because I deployed correctly. Now, this Lancer is going to get to shoot something, no doubt. So he's going to move on up, and he's going to move up his 10 inches. And now that he's moved up his full 10 inches, what do you think he can see? Well, let's draw that line. So we're going to draw straight from the middle, and we're going to hold it here. Boop, boop, boop. He is going to be able to see Mazrog, and it's possible he might be able to see the truck. So if this Lancer wants to put all of his shooting into Mazrog, I'm generally pretty happy. If he wants to put it into the truck, I'm also generally okay, because I don't really care about that truck. It just doesn't really matter to me. So this would be the truck on this particular deployment that would be holding, say, my Gretchen, or only a 5-man squad. That makes it very easy to deploy them when it gets blown up. This truck is going to be perfectly safe. These trucks are perfectly safe. I don't have to worry about being shot anywhere except for this truck and Mazrog. I don't care if my enemy shoots Mazrog, and if they want to shoot this truck, it's going to be my least valuable one at all. Now, my opponent is actually going to end up being in a very awful position for turn 2. So this Lancer moves all the way up. He wasn't able to shoot anything. This Lancer is now 100% going to die immediately because I'm going to disembark my Beast Snaggers and they're going to go devour him. Then my truck's going to move up and just hold the objective. So this puts me in a great position to win the game very, very simply. Now, one of the big concerns that people have in armies like this is they're very concerned about being move blocked. With good reason, I'll be honest with you. So if these scouts deploy, say, sorry about that, guys. If these scouts deploy perhaps 9 inches away from the line, call that 9 inches, then they could actually advance up and they could stand right here. And they could spread out like this to make movement very challenging for me in turn 1. There is no doubt about it, and it is a problem that we have to actually deal with. Now, in all reality, I don't particularly care because Mazrog gets to come up here. He'll kill the scouts just by touching them right there. My squid cogs can just advance up this side and run up this way, which still puts them in position for going to be a turn 2 charge. So it's not that big a deal, even if the scouts do advance up there. Let's say the scouts advance up the entire army, and they advance right up here to block right here as well. Well, you know what? That is absolutely a tough cookie, but it's still not the greatest position for your opponent to actually be in, for your opponent, actually. So one of the things that we can do is that this truck can still disembark. You can run up this way. This is a 6-inch disembark. Here, let me run it for you. So this is a 9-inch disembarkation. If I wanted to wall, that can get me a much easier charge. I probably don't want to wall. In all reality, what I probably do here is I just accept the fact that I'm going to kill these scouts with a beautiful little tank shock, and I'm happy for it. Then my opponent gets to spend a turn killing my truck and not killing the contents. I really don't care. So even if I get fully move blocked in turn 1, I'm actually still going to be in a great position to take advantage of my turn 2, my turn 3, and I will still crush. This also gives my squid hogs the ability to still move on up and puts them in a position, if I wanted to do the advance and charge thingy, to still dominate my opponent in the middle. Mazrog, very easily, likely, also, he gets to move his 10 inches, and this is without an advance, and then he's going to be in position to crush this one. Or if I do want to expend my ability to advance, I get to move over here. Now, not every army has the access to advance and charge like the orcs do. So some armies are going to have different mechanisms, and you're going to have to learn to use those mechanisms yourself. It's just part of the game. But this is how I would absolutely deploy here, and this is how I would move. Let's assume that we go second, in which case these scouts are probably going to be. They still can't move. It's just scout within 9 inches of me. So this is going to be the furthest that they get to go. Which means that, okay, maybe they block this line of this route for me, but then my squig hogs, they just get to move up here, or they advance and they hide from the Lancer, and then my truck gets to come and handle these scouts. This still puts me completely up the battlefield, ready to be in my opponent's grill, and I am cooking, and I'm looking really, really good. The key factor in using your mounted and your vehicle and your monsters is to remember that your mounted get to move through your vehicles and monsters. This is not a problem. These guys are ready to pivot this direction, they're ready to pivot this direction, and it's also to utilize terrain to your advantage. If you have 2-inch terrain, which you do if you're using GW standard terrain, then you get to move directly over these lines. It is not a problem. So that is my guide on how to use mounted. A lot of it is straight up in deployment, so I really encourage you to grab these maps, play around with them, draw your lines, see where you can move turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. At that point in time, once you learn where you can move, you don't have to worry or struggle so much against your opponent move blocking you or getting shot off the board turn 1. So this is my guide on how to deploy and use your mounted versus your vehicles. So hopefully this was really, really valuable for all of you. Well, actually, I guarantee, I know it was valuable for everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it, because I like it when you enjoy things as much as I like it when you get value out of things. The last thing that I'm going to say, just remember, everything in the game gets to ignore that 2 inches of height for movement. Very, very important. If you guys like this content, please hit the like, subscribe button. If you have any questions or any comments or concerns about this video, just type it down in the comments section, because as always, I do really pay a lot of attention to the comments. I basically respond to every single comment out there, at least the comments that come in for the first few days. If you have more questions for me, guys, I love my job. I love coaching Warhammer, and I love teaching Warhammer. We're very active in the Discord. The members-only Discord costs about $4. It's a really big support for me. It helps me. It keeps me motivated. It keeps me getting these videos out here to you. And I do a lot of stuff with a lot of my members. We've actually got some giveaways coming up here pretty soon, which is not one of the selling points for the members. But I recently was given a few items from some different people who are looking to sponsor the channel, and I'm gonna pass those over to my members because I really appreciate and I love you all, and the support you guys give me is overwhelming. So you guys should hop in there as well, because I think it's going to be really beneficial for your game. And if you're looking to take your gaming to the next level, I do have coaching services, which is amazing. And for right now, they're still pretty darn affordable. They will be going up in the new year at a certain time, which I'll give everyone a heads up. I'm not going to be like surprise anyone with big prices increases at all. But we are getting some people ready for LVO right now. We're getting people ready for a bunch of the super majors. There are a lot of guys, and well, there is one gal actually in the Happy Crumpin' crew, and we are starting to take the world by storm. I'm also really, really excited and really, really proud to soon announce a team that I will be sponsoring as well, which is super exciting. But anyway, everybody, this is my video. This is my guide on how to use your mounted and your monsters and vehicles. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a very lovely day. Until next time, enjoy crumpin'. Bye-bye.